Snipers, you have to see what's happening in Bitcoin price right now as we're heading into the weekend, and we have a lot to discuss today, Snipers. We also re-entered our long position. Check this out. Smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm if you support this content. The first piece of news is that Bitcoin's RSI on the monthly has broken down below the March of 2020 levels. And now we are in bottom territory for Bitcoin's monthly RSI. And then look at this, the first 2 days of June have seen massive net inflows pushing the global Bitcoin under management to new all-time highs for institutions entering into spot Bitcoin ETFs. Just look how through April, May, and June, we have seen an overall increase in institutional accumulation for Bitcoin, which for those on the Snipers channel know, we love to watch and think like an institution. So this is an extremely positive sign. And then there are some things happening with the revolving parts that we'll discuss later in this video. But the headline for the 4-dimensional revolving parts today is the fact that the Ethereum to Bitcoin chart has a bullish divergence right now on the daily chart. Now, we did re-enter our long position. For those in our Discord, we got a better entry at 29,530. That's already hit its first profit target. Heading into the weekend, that's when the markets are the most manipulated. Our liquidation price is at 26,422 for this long position. So let's dive into the charts and talk about how the week closed for equity markets and the range that Bitcoin is currently playing in and why we are still inside of a long position, Snipers. Let's go straight into the Bitcoin chart. And just notice how exactly as we've been talking about here on the Snipers channel, the most accurate cryptocurrency technical analysis on the internet, Bitcoin is consolidating within its weekly open as a support level sitting right at 29,500 and its monthly open as a resistance level at 31,780 to be exact. This monthly open is going to be here all month. And so this is going to be a major resistance throughout the next few weeks that we'll continue to monitor. But right now, Bitcoin is really pushing against its weekly open. And that is a potential concern because into the weekend, where we know markets are the most manipulated, what if we start to see downside below 29,500 to potentially test some of these lows, maybe even clear out some of the margin positions that have accumulated here inside of this consolidation? That's certainly on the table as a potential case on the table. But here's what I'll say. If we were to just look at the environment outside of Bitcoin to see whether that type of move below 29,500 is justified, at least this weekend, I would say that it's not justified. And I say that with the S&P 500, notice how similar to Bitcoin, it had this consolidation where it has so far formed lows, and now we've moved higher inside of this consolidation, almost as if we're starting to break out and form a bullish, flaggish type of pattern here to potentially see continuation to the upside. And so I say that the S&P 500 is actually a bullish puzzle piece coming into this week. I know we were down to close the day, but just notice how over the last 3 days, our daily candle has only formed higher lows. And so it doesn't look like we have a federal case to make against Bitcoin right now to see downside through this weekend. As a matter of fact, I think it's more likely, based on how the S&P 500 closed, for Bitcoin to actually get above 30,000 this weekend, and maybe we'll see manipulation to the upside, not the downside. And so let's talk about some other really important revolving parts. The DXY doing the opposite of the S&P 500. What you'd like to see with the DXY is downside if you want to assume upside in Bitcoin. And look how we have this downside, and now we have this flag, which opposite to the S&P 500 is a bearish flag that potentially could see continuation to the downside. And so the DXY looks good. I wouldn't say this is a bearish puzzle piece whatsoever. As a matter of fact, what we're looking at here on the Cypress channel is for the DXY, as it loves to do, to come down to at least test this 20-week moving average after it already broke 20-year highs. And so I do want to mention Ethereum right now because it is at a very important support level where just below this major support at 1760, the only next major level of support is the previous all-time high from 2018 at 1440. And so we want Ethereum to stay above 1760 preferably, but the reason we've been focused on Bitcoin long positions is because the Ethereum to Bitcoin chart, notice how it's continuing to see weakness. As we expected, it is continuing to sell off, and it looks like it has another destination in mind before it might come up to test 65,000 Satoshis. But what I really like, and why I mentioned Bitcoin dominance isn't something we should really take too much weight from when analyzing the four-dimensional revolving parts, is the fact that look how well Bitcoin dominance has been moving up, with Bitcoin not necessarily needing to see further downside. It's just this sideways consolidation that Bitcoin is in is already allowing the Bitcoin dominance to move. And so it's good that all it's taking is a little bit of sideways action with Bitcoin to shake out some of the altcoins, which are most likely hedging into Bitcoin and selling off into Bitcoin just because of the extreme fear in the market right now, which is exactly what would happen during a potential bottom, because when an asset is completely oversold, there's always going to be a lot of fear. So the extreme fear is not necessarily a bad thing. Coming into this weekend, that's why I think there's still a bullish bias. And then the last and most interesting revolving part that I just want to put on the table here is the NASDAQ. Remember, snipers, we talked about the 600-day moving average in white being the potential bottom for the NASDAQ. Why? Because in 2020, we came down below the 600-day moving average, and then we moved above it, consolidated before seeing continuation to new highs for the tech sector in the equity markets. Same thing in 2019, 2018, whatever you want to call it. It was late 2018, early 2019 that we came down to the 600-day moving average for the NASDAQ. And we also bottomed there. And now you can see we're actually at the 600-day moving average, consolidating, what the NASDAQ loves to do when it's potentially bottoming. And so the NASDAQ, a very nice puzzle piece that I wanted to put out there. And then Japan, when it comes to the largest international market, breaking out today, gapping up to close the week. It looks really good. Coming to test its 200-day moving average. Here's what I'll wrap up with, snipers. In any bear market, because it's hard to argue that we're not in a bear market right now, at some point or another, there are relief rallies. And Bitcoin so far has only come up to the 200-day moving average once and got rejected. But we haven't seen a second test. You haven't seen headlines saying, oh, Bitcoin trying to break above its 200-day moving average. And that's a headline that you'll typically see during a bear market when there's a relief rally. And so I'm expecting, if we were to try to project the future here, that at some point Bitcoin wants to come down to test this 200-day moving average. And what's interesting is in a few days, it's going to be crossing over the 600-day moving average, which we know is a very important level for Bitcoin in the past. And so it looks like there might be a move here very soon. And in the macro, we could be aiming towards the 200-day moving average, and that's sitting around 40,000 US dollars. It's at 41,950. And so we could potentially see this breakout if we get above this structural resistance that has held Bitcoin down since breaking below the 20-week moving average. Maybe 40,000 is actually on the table, not just 35,000. And so I'll wrap up with this. The range that Bitcoin is currently in has a resistance of 34,788. That's a confirmation that potentially 40,000 is on the table and maybe even a macro bottom. Our support's 25,000. In a worst case scenario, we can come down to 25,000. But we don't talk about that much here on the Cypress channel, especially because of the fact that our thesis from the start has been the Luna bottom is the bottom right now, the psychological bottom, and that at 27,600 could be very valid. I think Arthur Hayes today, the founder of BitMEX, doesn't have the best reputation, was on Twitter saying that he's confident Bitcoin's bottom is between 25,000 and 27,000, and our recent low was 26,700. That could potentially be the bottom. He's basically saying that Bitcoin could have already have bottomed, right? Yes, it wasn't at 26,700 for a very long amount of time, but that's typically what happens when you reach a destination. You immediately turn right back around. And so I just want to throw those puzzle pieces out on the table. And so 25,000 is the major support in this range. This green line is important right now because it's the previous weekly open at 30,293. And this is a perfect way to wrap up this video. This previous weekly open is actually going to move down in 48 hours. And it's going to stay there for the next 7 days, right at the current weekly open, sitting at 29,500, let's call it. And right now, Bitcoin is testing that level. We want to hold above 29,500 if we don't want to assume a potential weekend downside scenario. I don't see puzzle pieces justifying that Bitcoin needs to come down below 29,500. Maybe while you're watching this video, we do come down for a short amount of time. We wick down, whatever it might be, to clear out long positions. It's expected on the weekend. But by Sunday, when equity markets start to open, if Bitcoin is above this previous weekly open at 29,491, then we are starting the week off bullish, and that could start the run to break this bearish resistance level, which currently sits above the monthly open, and it's right around the $33,000 level, give or take, depending on time. It could be a different level, but that's really the bearish resistance. So we can even go as far as to say that with that 200-day moving average at 40,000, if we break above 33,000, that could be a confirmation that 40,000 is on the table, and that is a bear market relief rally that could potentially turn into something even more significant. So with that, thank you all snipers for tuning in to our Friday update. These are fun because we're heading into the weekend where the markets are the most manipulated. Cryptocurrency markets are still open, but equity markets are closed. And with CME futures closed, the markets get manipulated. So smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm if you support this content, snipers. And I will see you all next time, snipers.